Nice. So you just have to do it twice, basically. Cool. Welcome, everyone, to the DXdao community call for July 29th, 2021. Yeah, we have a lot of cool topics to discuss today. This is going to be a pretty open discussion. The agenda roughly is DX vote and governance 2.0 update. I think mainly from Augusto, and then we can chat about that, and then a recap and some learnings from ETHCC and attendance in Paris last week, which I think was quite valuable for the ecosystem, and everyone in the space was excited to meet up in real life again. And I think a lot of DXdao community contributors and other community members were in attendance, and so got to meet for the first time in person and really see what a ETH event's like. And then another topic that we'd like to openly discuss is kind of the censoring of tokens in front ends for dApps. And this is relevant because of the recent news of Uniswap banning a few tokens from their front end and making them actually impossible to trade through their front end. And so raises a bigger question of are like front ends owned by DAOs better? Are they more resistant to like outside voice and etc. So agenda, if I guess we can kick things off with an update on DX Vote, which has been making a lot of progress. Augusto, if you want to give a few words of the state and plans and yeah, what's going, and then also there were some interesting discussions around governance 2.0 this week and kind of what the DXdao community is thinking related to that as well.
Can you guys hear me? You can see me too. Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah, I did some pretty good advances on DX Vote. We have it working on 4 networks. We can submit proposals on contribution reward and multi-call schemes. Although all these features, they are in experimental state, right? There is a chance that when you, for example, are going to commit or to propose a proposal on contribution reward, that it might not work. I tested it and it should work, but anyway, if you see anything that is not working, just let me know and hola Moira, and submit an issue on GitHub. So pretty much that's it. I did some changes on, for example, adding countdowns and trying to count down, for example, if you enter now when you're going to see a proposal, you should see when it's going to be executed, boosted. There are some pending executions missing, the order of the proposals. So everything kind of works. Also, a very important thing is that I breached a bunch of tokens on Arbitrum testnet. They were added to the avatar address in Arbitrum testnet. We allow the tokens to be traded through this permission registry that we have in DXvote. This is kind of a permission layer over the scheme that allows you to tell to which scheme and the avatar address what it is allowed to do or not. This adds a very good security layer on the DXvote infrastructure, something that we are lacking, that we are missing in Alchemy right now. So this is one of the features that we are going to be using. It worked. We added, for example, we set the limit for the ERC20 token to be traded in Arbitrum.
How do we? Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, I was about to start dancing. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of things happening there. There is a submit issue link in the footer. So it would be awesome if we can start trying to do everything through DXvote on every network. We should be able to. You should be able now, for example, if you want to vote a proposal with less reputation than the one you have, you should be able to do it too. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If there is no question regarding DX vote, I would like to say a few words about Governance 2.0.
Yeah, one observation actually. I was in Paris. I was talking about DX vote in general as a more resistant front end for DXDAO's governance. And when I would mention that, like, one of the things, it removes the dependence on the graph, right? And actually that was quite a interesting topic for many people. And obviously it depends on the dApp that you are are building and the user experience. But there were other people that also have done their best to remove dependency on the graph. And okay, it's not like a hit on the graph, but if dApps don't need to use the graph and you want to be a resistant, like, honey badger dApp that, like, always can be used and won't disrupt your governance, that is a becoming a popular tactic. So I guess that's cool that you've done that. Are there any other questions about DX Vote, yeah, that anyone from the community has? Maybe not. So yeah, if you want to say a few words about Governance 2.0, that'd be great.
Yeah, first regarding the graph independence, that is something that I think is super cool. I expected it to work. I thought it was going to work, and now it actually works great. We have DXvote working on 4 networks. Yeah, the way it works is that we index all the information ourselves through a script, and all this information is bundled into the build of the app. So this worked for us because it is not, how can we say it? We don't depend too much on real-time data, right? For example, then DeFi exchanges, they do, so they need the graph. That is very hard, and yeah, the real-time data that the blockchain provides you is not good enough when you are trading financial assets, when you are trading and using a lot of funds on your protocol, like, for example, Swapper, Uniswap, 1inch, all the stuff. That was the thing that allow us to do it, and that we started working on it, because it is not that hard. It's a hard way to do it. I always say that it is a good way, because when the other applications are down, we are up and running, and we need to be up and running. And yeah, about Governance 2.0, I was reading again the Governance 2.0 implementation that it was submitted last year. I just wanted to say that the changes that we need to do on the governance layer, what we designed on Governance 2.0 was, it is just change how do we get the reputation when we are going to do the voting. The way our DAO is designed, we have different smart contracts, and there is one smart contract particularly that takes charge of managing all the reputation, minting and burning and assigning all the reputation between the voters. That is the single contract that we need to update, that we need to change in order to implement Governance 2.0. And again, the less changes that we do, the better, because I think it is proven that regarding, putting aside all the risks that we have with all the current, with our current technical infrastructure, it has proved to be solid enough for our governance and for all the funds that we are having, right? So less changes that we can apply, that we can do to implement Governance 2.0, the better. Of course, it will be awesome to take this chance to do it will be awesome to do like a security upgrade, if we want to call it, on on some of our contracts. Most importantly, the controller contract. It's a controller contract that it controls the communication between the schemes and the avatar, and also between the schemes and the reputation. So that is the only single contract that we need to change the code, that we need to upgrade and we need to update in order to implement governance 2.0. And yeah, that's mainly it. Then it would be how we describe and how do we show, how do we display the reputation that every voter has. I think everything, anything that is any proposal or an implementation or anything we do outside that scope of work, it is outside all our needs of governance 2.0.
Cool. One question from the chat. Does DXvote solve the issue around needing to use relayers for ETH transfers?
Not really, because that is a problem that it was introduced by the Berlin hard fork, and we are still using the same avatar address. The only way to fix that is by changing the avatar address, by deploying a new avatar smart contract. That will mean changing the address. Anyway, it will make it way easier for us to find a work around the relayers, and it also allows the schemes to send funds itself. For example, we have the master wallet scheme and the quick wallet scheme. The quick wallet scheme, if you enter on Arbitrum or Rinkeby, you're going to see that it's going to make calls from the scheme address itself. That means that the scheme can control its own funds. The master wallet is going to make calls from the avatar. The avatar needs the relayer because it has the code, it has smart contract code that was deployed before the Berlin hard fork. We only also, it's important to say that we only need the relayers because we are sending funds to a Genesis wallet. If we are talking about that relayer, we only need that because every time we send funds to a Genesis wallet, it takes a bit more gas and it's not enough to the gas that we are spending by default when we are sending Ether from the avatar.
Any other questions? We can move to the next topic. I was hoping that we have some reflections and we did some learnings and recaps in the forum and on an earlier call this week about EthCC and attending, Ethereum in Paris, Ethereum Week in Paris. And I thought it might be good if anyone here wants to give a verbal recap of what they learned or some of their feelings just for the wider community that's attending this call. I mean, I guess people can read this stuff in the forum. I could start and say one of the biggest takeaways that I had was really a big focus on DAOs. And a lot of times when you meet people, the first question was like, "Oh, what DAOs are you in?" And like that's a question that 6 months ago or even people didn't ask that question. And so I think with the focus on DAOs and people trying to figure out governance and big companies dissolving entities and becoming DAOs, and then all the different flavors of DAOs from less decentralized to more decentralized DAOs. But DAOs are obviously a hot topic and something that DXdao has been near the front of from the beginning. And then a big topic of like DAO to DAO relations is really important, I think, because as more DAOs enter this space, really there's this whole dynamic of DAOs aligning interests with each other, interacting with each other, hiring each other. So there's things like PR DAOs now, which other DAOs can hire. You know, you could go and hire a PR firm, but is it more interesting to hire a PR DAO that could solve your DAO's needs? And so there are ways with tokens to align interests for those types of things. But yeah, like a list of things like investing in other DAOs, aligning interests with other DAOs, hiring other DAOs, building products with other DAOs, teaching DAOs about decentralized governance, experimenting with different types of DAO frameworks, and then like using more products in the space that are owned and made and controlled by DAOs. So I think all of the, all of that is going to be a really big focus over the next 6 to 12 months. And so DXdao, I think, has a chance to lead the way in that space. But I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that dynamic, and if it's possible, and how, and then the details might be like, how do you make sure that you align interests when you do a lot of these DAO to DAO interactions? Is a token swap the most effective way, or is it an investment or some other thing? Anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, just as a echoing a conversation we were having about engaging with the contractor and like some of the real life problems of a DAO, like how do you build products, how do you kind of make payments and to contractors, and all of these different things that are like the headaches. And one of the things that I was thinking about is even in like DAO to DAO interactions, like who is the arbitrator maybe that could be like escrowing funds in a smart contract and then releasing them on certain conditions, if that like cooperation is more of a payment for service one. So I think there are a lot of like service provider opportunities for those like DAO to DAO interactions, and even some of those service provider opportunities that will like connect things to the off-chain world, but kind of be both that like the on-chain wrapper for that agreement or interaction between the two DAOs.
I also think there's opportunities to do things in more trustless ways between DAOs. I think like an example that you could imagine that I think we've maybe even discussed a little bit would be DXdao working with another DAO to provide a farming campaign, to like fund a farming campaign on Swapper, or it could be other platforms as well, right? To kind of commit funds together to some effort and do that with a third party contractor, like an independent smart contract to handle that and do it in a trustless way. I think there's probably a lot of room for infrastructure around like enabling DAO to DAO interactions to be done in a trustless way via consensus. I wasn't able to attend ECC, much FOMO on my end, but I was, I think some of the reflections that were interesting to hear about, like, how was DXDAO's presence at the conference, and like what were some of the ideas on how we should approach future conferences. Would be curious to hear, like, I think some people already expressed these in different forums, but like Sky and Melanie, I think you and others had some interesting ideas around that.
In one of our chats, I likened DXdao to one of those ships up in the North Pole, breaking the ice and paving the path for others to follow. We're not as appealing as some cruise line where it's all fun, but we're doing the hard work. And even if we don't get the credit short term, I'm sure it will be appreciated in the years to come. What I'm saying is we're certainly massively underappreciated at the moment. DXdao is a public good. Mic drop.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nathan. So we ideally should get better at telling those stories, right? Because if we are breaking that ice, like how do we tell those stories and get those stories out there? And one idea, so there's a DAO that is focused, well, no, there's a PR firm that actually has created a DAO in order to try to tell this story. And one way they're going to tell that story is because they themselves are taking that path. And so they want to tell stories about the leaders in this space that are forging the way, and whether or not they can get those stories into like crypto or mainstream publications is an unknown. But yeah, I think like I can picture a New York Times article that says something like 2,000 people across the world have like left organizations like banks and corporate companies and are working for like internet native clubs, a living doing that. Like that's an interesting story that I think the New York Times would want to publish. And so they're going to need some examples and they're going to need people to help tell that story. But I think the mainstream will catch on eventually.
I mean, I'll give an analogy from my experience from the real world, from the meat space, to paint a really good picture of what it is. I tried to do a Wikipedia page for DXdao, and it was very, very simple. No shilling, no advertising, nothing. I was just saying it's a decentralized, autonomous organization developing protocols, doing on-chain governance using consensus, blah, blah. It was just a few lines. It got rejected. The reason for rejection? Advertisement. Like, what the hell? If you go to the Wikipedia page of Tesla, they have their stock listed in there, prompting you to go and buy stock. They have all of their models. They have everything. Go to the Microsoft page. They have the stock listed there. Go buy some stock. And that's not advertisement? Like, what is Wikipedia doing? That's censorship. That's, I don't know. I'm lost for words.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I also agree. Like, it's very hard to communicate to people like what we're doing, and I think that's part of the problem. Because if people really understood what we're about, I think we would be flooded with people coming in. But it's very hard to grasp like what we're about, and we definitely need to work on it. To maybe how to phrase it, how to put how to communicate it better. I don't know, maybe like some marketing effort should be like put in place to like figure out how to communicate this better.
Yeah, and I think some comments were also about like getting folks on the same page, kind of around certain talking points that might be current or topical ahead of a conference. I thought that was an interesting idea as well. Yeah, definitely. Like, what are the two sentences that describe DXDAO, or like, what's the elevator pitch?
So maybe we should move next to maybe will be a more exciting conversation because a lot of people have strong opinions about this, but topic is related to, you know, censorship and censoring tokens in front ends. And so this is relevant because Uniswap recently announced that in their front end they were basically censoring or making it impossible to trade certain tokens through their front end into the protocol. And this is different than like a token list curation, which like shows tokens in, you know, drop downs and things. And, you know, generally most dexes, you have the ability to, you know, paste in an address, see access a pool with that token's liquidity and trade it in a rather permissionless way. In this scenario, they have implemented basically a disallow list so that it is impossible to trade certain tokens through their front end. And so the bigger general question is like, is this okay? Is Uniswap very vulnerable to pressures from like voices in the space? And then are front ends that are owned by decentralized collectives more like stronger, more resistant, unstoppable, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? So that's kind of the topic, and it would be great to hear people's interesting takes on this topic. And there was a tweet thread on one of DXDAO's Twitters, which was kind of, you know, made some claims and things related to this, but it's very nuanced and there's lots of specific little details, so it's hard to like convey it in like 3 tweets or something. But yeah, this is an interesting topic so that we can discuss now.
Yeah, that tweet thread was from Swapper's Twitter actually, and then one of the tweets was retweeted by DXdao, but same idea basically. And there's also some interesting discussion going around, like what would happen if individual members of our DAO got a letter from the SEC saying, you know, you gotta do some sort of a censorship or something, and then what we would do about that too.
And I think like one thing to be clear on is DXdao does control its front ends, right? So it has the ability to do kind of the same things that Uniswap is doing in their front ends, right? So it's not like there's anything, you know, structurally like making it impossible for DXdao to, you know, whitelist or blacklist or do anything on the front ends. But I think the difference here, right, is like why is Uniswap like censoring these tokens, right? It's not because Uniswap, the company or whatever, feels that these tokens like shouldn't be on Uniswap, right? Like I don't see any justification from like the Uniswap community as to like why this should be done, right? So it's like they are bending to outside pressure, right, to do this, like perceived risks and stuff. They don't feel that it's right. They're just doing it out of like concern for themselves, and they are like, you know, a specific corporation based in the United States. And so I think like what differentiates DXDAO from them when you really like look at it is like that decision for DXDAO like would not be made by like a few, you know, VCs in a boardroom, right? Like it would have to be done via on-chain consensus by the 400 plus like rep holders, right? And I think a lot of the philosophy and spirit of DXDAO is to like kind of be unstoppable, like, and again, that doesn't mean like criminal. No, like we want to do the right thing. I think all the rep holders I know want to do the something good and positively impact the world, right? But to do it and enable financial freedom, right? To not bend to some influence of a particular government or some centralized entity because of their particular interests.
Yeah, well, I think that if we ever did, then it would really compromise the whole spirit of the DAO, and we'd really lose basically the whole point of being decentralized. Because then we're no better than like a crypto exchange, and that seems like the direction. So it's almost the direction that Uniswap is going in. Is they get closer and closer to a centralized exchange as time goes on and more regulation happens. So I think it's a problem that all of DeFi is going to have to face because, we're not immune to regulation.
Right. And I think it is an important and like kind of one of the unfortunate things about this Uniswap news is like at least how I saw it being reported in kind of the mainstream media, like Yahoo Finance type articles, right? Was that, Uniswap is like censoring like removing these things, right? And they don't distinguish like what that really means, right? And there's a distinction between Uniswap's front end and like what the company is doing versus like Uniswap, the protocol that's deployed to the blockchain, right? And this is something that I think anybody like us that have paid attention to this space, like this is no surprise, right? It's like no surprise that Uniswap, the company that's like based in New York, is like paying attention to regulators, right? Of course they are, right? We always knew this. Like there's no surprise here, right? Like, but the important thing is the protocol is immutable. Yeah, and I think that the interesting part is, well, like just because Uniswap is, controlling their front end in a way that is like a bit fearful of regulation, like that doesn't mean that there can't be front ends that are done in a more decentralized way, right? And I think that's what's cool about DXDAO is, right? Like is from the beginning, DXDAO has taken a very decentralization focused approach to the full stack, right? To the front end. And I'm not saying we're like perfectly decentralized. Of course not. That's like something we're like a direction we're trying to move in. But like from the beginning, structurally, things have been set up in a way to pursue decentralization of the full stack. And like fundamentally, a lot of these VC-backed incorporated DeFi entities were not set up that way, right? They were set up as a traditional like startup corporation to do something on blockchain, but to like otherwise like operate in a very traditional way.
So the question is, are front ends that are owned by DAOs better, and will that become more popular in the space? There's a lot of DAOs, but most DAOs
I have a
are along the
prediction.
DAO spectrum. Yep.
I think we'll start to see later on when some of these projects actually get hit by SEC or the workers don't dare to work at some of these companies or whatever could happen in the future. We will see protocols and front ends being two different parties doing it. So one company is making the protocol, and it could be community that makes the front end, or it could be another company making the front end, basically. This is what I think will happen. And I don't know when we will see this, but something drastic needs to happen, like SEC comes in and starts banning more shit.
Well, it's interesting too to think about how a lot of these protocols, like Uniswap V2, definitely, I'm less familiar with V3 at this point, but it's immutable, it's deployed, like there just simply is no ability to like change it, right? Like so it's kind of there for anybody to deploy front ends to. And so I think that kind of is a setup that lends itself to like what you're describing, right? Like these protocols could outlive the companies that deployed them. And in the future, there could be other entities that are like implementing front ends around the protocols.
I think there will be most probably be like companies doing profit or revenue by just doing front ends. They don't do any protocols. And so let's say when Tornado wanted to deploy, instead of them doing it, they did like a semi like they let the community basically deploy the smart contracts, but they still do the front end themselves. So right now to coordinate someone else to make a front end, it's too much. It's basically you doing it. But if there's a professional entity out there that could take care of the whole front end, I think a lot of crypto projects would be interested.
But aren't like any companies running those kinds of front ends like in basically the same boat that Uniswap
Yeah,
is
but
in?
they could be 100% anonymous, right? They could like run another type of anonymity because the front end there's not as much as like the vulnerability is not as big as on the protocol side. So anonymous front end team is better than anonymous back end team.
Yeah, I think like broadly speaking, the front end and stable coins are the two biggest leverage points for regulators. And I actually think the front ends you could see more problems there in the future. I don't know if you like even at the browser level, I wouldn't be surprised to see like censorship on like Chrome or something going to certain websites and things like that. And you could even see the browser turning into like an app store like level of approval. So I think there could be a lot of like leverage that could be exerted on the front end.
I would add to that list too, like fiat on ramps
Yeah,
or another.
yeah.
Kind
Well, the
of
stable
fiat
coin is kind
variable.
of that.
Yeah, that's maybe what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, by stable coins.
I would hope that it wouldn't be successful censoring it from a browser. Well, because the government has been trying to ban torrent sites so you can download movies illegally and stuff for probably decades at this point, but you can still access them. So I don't know, like if they can't block that from the browser, I don't know why they would block DeFi.
Well, I don't know if like 1.3 billion people in China don't have free access to internet. So there's like a lot of internet censorship, I think, going on.
Oh, in China, definitely, yeah.
I think we're kind of looking at the timeline of like how this will play out. I don't know. I think you're seeing this in the social media stuff now, right?
I mean, there's some censorship that we don't talk about. You don't use Google to find pirate shit anymore. Like back then, you can actually search for torrents in Google. Google made an effort to remove a lot of that, and it works. So that's one kind of censorship where they don't index pirated sites anymore, or they do, but they don't show it in the top of the. They give them like low ranking score, even though they're super relevant. So that's one kind of censorship that can happen to crypto, right? So we can have regulated exchanges coming in Google. Like if someone searches for, I don't know, trade, swap, crypto, or buy NFTs, like Google can decide regulated centralized services first, and then decentralized later on. So I don't think we should trust our free world to take care of us. Most probably this will happen.
I just tested it out right now and I searched it, and basically it's all centralized exchanges. It's like Kraken, Gemini, and then articles about what the best basically centralized exchanges are. So
But
yeah.
there's a reason for that. Like decentralized services don't do SEO. Like I worked with SEO for 3 years, and most dApps out there is very very badly done in the like SEO world, and they don't go out and buy links and try to like build up their how do you say it, like the ranking power. So centralized services actually they are competing to each others, right? While when we compete to other decentralized services, we're not competing on Google. We're competing on the user experience level or on the token level. So I think it's a different world, but I think like talking in the future, getting new users to crypto, it's gonna be Google. It's gonna be word of mouth. It's gonna be a lot of the traditional places.
Yeah, that gives me an idea because I've done some SEO when I was at Dell, but it was all using WordPress. But I'd be interested to see how I can improve SEO with stuff that's hosted on IPFS. You know, that might actually be a detriment to SEO being hosted on IPFS, but we'll see what we can do there.
So this is actually a question that came before crypto. There are experiments on not having a domain, just having an IP versus having a domain. Having a .com domain is the most powerful thing you can have right now when it comes to ranking power. Google says this is not true, but people testing this shows it's true. Having local domains is also like another thing. Like if I'm in Sweden and searching for buy Ethereum, I'm gonna get local stuff. So it's gonna matter, but not that much, if I understand it correctly.
That's interesting. So are you saying that like alternative domain endings like .link or
So
.eth don't show up?
I'll give you one quick thing that will give you the best idea for what's going to happen, or how SEO on everything works. It doesn't matter what you do. The amount of links you get to your domain, it's gonna the amount of quality links you get to your domain, it's gonna rank you up. So we basically need to be super careful when we talk about our product to give them the right domain. So let's say we gave Arbitrum Swapper Swapper dot something else than Swapper.eth, and they linked it, and that domain started ranking almost above the official domain. So we at DXdao need to like make blocks actually link to our products, even though it's the eth.link domain. The more links, the better, and this is how like 90% of SEO works. The rest is just details.
Definitely. That ties in with the whole media DAO thing, because if that's another benefit basically of having mainstream news articles about us is if they link to us, it'll improve our SEO.
Yeah. So why do you think DeFi Pulse is forcing everyone to put a link to their website? It's because the more relevant websites linking to them, the higher up they will be. Like if people actually search for DeFi stuff, they will probably be very high ranked. So this is a SEO strategy.
Yeah. I suppose it would go against the whole spirit if we forced people to link to Omen if they wanted to use Omen.
100%. But we could be smart. We could build Omen so you can embed like markets, right? And it links directly to Omen or something like that. We could be smart by doing a product that is linkable and embeddable. So that's a really like great way to do links.
Oh, definitely. Well, I don't want to go on this topic too long, but I will talk with Omen Squad about how I can make a make it so that when you post, okay, so like part of SEO is the text that shows up with a link, and right now there's no text for any link to any Omen market, but something that's already been talked about is making that text so when you post the market on Twitter, it'll say the actual market, and same for when you do a Google search, is making that show up.
Cool. Well, interesting discussion. Lots of points to take away from this. Would be there's you can get involved in this conversation on Twitter too. Probably still going around. If there's are there any other topics that people would like to talk about? DXdao probably needs more memes. So if you make memes, start producing. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and see you next week.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
You guys.